That's true. Naked Palpatine.
Oh, you pick that one. Fresh out of the clone tank, nude Palpatine is my
Well, that's the first thing I think of when you say Dark Empire Palpatine.
Hello everybody and welcome back to the Star Wars Expanded Universe, narrated by Disney or Colonel Lucasfilm, whichever way you slice it, Legends. I can do that better. There you go. Book 19 of the 19-book epic, the finale to the new Jedi Order series. This 19-book series focusing on the Yusong Vong War and its conclusion here in this book. I, of course, prefer the Japanese art, but here is the abysmal, in my opinion, cover art of the American cover. I don't like it. You got, I assume, Shimura. You got some ships in the bottom. You got, I guess, Jason. That's not what I imagined Jason looked like at all. Kind of Luke. Just an awful cover. Absolutely abysmal. I hate it. But whatever. This is a big one. And it's probably going to be the last review that like half my audience watches, for those who didn't unsubscribe. Because stuff. So I have to say there. But, it's the last one that people will probably care about, which is okay. I still have several fan fictions to review, and I have to go through the story set after, of course, and then, you know, I'll eventually find those old, I'll spend an absorbent amount of money on the Clone Wars digests and the, you know, all those comics and magazines and all that stuff, and I'll have a little bit more additional stuff to talk about, which I didn't have before, because there's only so much I could illegally find online. So, but, you know, this is kind of, there's a few places in the EU where people tend to stop. One of them, for those who really hate any darkness in their franchise, they stop with the Hand of Thrawn duology. They're like, that's it. We don't want nothing that comes after. We want happiness. No. So they stop there. You know, maybe read the young adult books, Young Jedi Knights and Junior Jedi Knights, and then you have the other people that stop at Unifying Force. So, like, it's a good conclusion, don't need anything else, done. And then, you know, everybody else that goes all the way to the very, very end with the Legacy comics and everything. And then you have mix and matches of all that, but, you know, people get really opinionated post Return of the Jedi. I think pretty much everyone has a general consensus that the prequel era of the expanding universe just generally made the prequels better, so people like reading them, minus a lot of the Clone Wars novels, which suck major butt. And then, of course, a lot of people like the stuff before the prequels with the Tales of the Jedi and KOTOR and all that. So, but this is the end of an era, for sure. I mean, the next trilogy will be more of a transition piece into the actual era, which is the Legacy era. But this is the last bit of the New Jedi Order era in its entirety, because before that we had the New Republic, and we had this. The first thing I really have to say, and this may be blasphemous to a lot of you, of course this is the Unifying Force by James Luceno. James Luceno, prolific author in the EU, worshipped by many. He wrote 2 other books within this franchise. He was a big help on the entire project behind the New Jedi Order. He was somebody that people constantly would talk to and ask for direction and help. And not that he was technically in charge of the whole thing. He was in a sense, but he wasn't the one actually directing everything. But everybody, regardless, kind of came to him for sage advice and wisdom, because a lot of people respect James Luceno, and for understandable reason, because he's James Luceno. And he's kind of like one of the key factors that made the prequels so good, with Labyrinth of Evil, Dark Lord, Rise of Darth Vader, Darth Plagueis, Cloak of Deception. Like, this man just made the prequel era so much better to enjoy. Um, but I have to say, I don't know what it is about his new Jedi Order stuff. Maybe it's because it was one of his earlier stuff that he did. But I found the pacing of his previous duology pretty awful. There's a lot of, before you hate me, there's a lot of amazing stuff in that duology. It's James Luceno. He loves tying continuity and making connections, and there's a lot of great parts in both of those duologies, but at the same time, it drags. And maybe not everyone agrees with that, because I know a lot of people worship Luceno in the same way that a lot of people worship Zahn. But I am trying to be objective here, and maybe this is just personal preference, I don't know, but I have to be honest when I see it, and I feel like in that duology, the pacing was off. And again, here I feel like the pacing is off. The last 100 pages or 130 pages breezes by. It is smooth. It gets to the point. Yada yada yada. Dot 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 dot. It just flies by. It's brilliant. That finale from Coruscant onward is just utter perfection. I have no complaints. The ride to get there, though, very hit or miss. Not that any of it is written badly. It is James Luceno. He never fails to miss a beat. However, there are certain parts where I'm like, okay, let's go. I don't care. Let's get to the finale. I don't care. Get to it. You are taking too effing long. And I think the main reason for that, two reasons actually. This book is 525 pages long. First issue, just by itself, removing anything else, this book did not need to be 500 pages. Now don't get me wrong, this book is good. I said the same thing about Star by Star, and I really like that book. But the pacing was off. It did not need to be as long as it was in Star by Star, and it did not need to be this long in this book. But the reason it is, outside of Universal, just for, production, I guess. I don't know if it's the right word for it, because they're writers. They're making a movie. But this is, for all intents and purposes, meant to be the finale to the entire saga. Anything. There should be no more stories after this. You can count Legacy if you want, but this entire book is meant to be an ending of sorts. It does kind of leave off stuff, though. There's certain things at the end where it's like, are they going to pick up with that somewhere? But mostly, other than a little sprinkles of a hint of other things that could happen, it's mostly, here's the end. And that's how it was intended to be written. So obviously, if you're writing the end of Star Wars, you're going to want to make it a little bit longer, right? Because you want to stay in the universe longer before you end it. But at the same time, I love the OT movies, 4, 5, and 6, but I don't want to sit through a 5-hour cut of Return of the Jedi. I don't care how good it is. It's just an unnecessary long movie if it's that long. Hell, the extended editions of Lord of the Rings are like 3 hours and a half long, close to 4 hours, and that's almost stretching it. That's why there's a theatrical release, because that's all you need to get the point. It's just if you're a really big fan and you want it to be even longer, you can have that. So I think just in a vacuum, as its own novel, I think it's too long. And I think the biggest contributor to this factor is the fact that this series is 19 books long. Now, I have to stress, I love the Star Wars Expanded Universe. I love New Jedi Order. It is one of my favorite things in all fiction. I love this. I love it more than the films. Mostly. As an overall story, I love it more than the films. In execution, in practice, hell no. Rereading it a second time, the first time I was so excited, like, oh my god, here's a story that's not the sequels, because I had just gone off the heels of the sequels, so I was excited to see what the Expanded Universe would do. So I ignored a lot of problems, because I was excited, because I was getting more stories. And we'll see. I'm going to try to be as objective as possible moving forward, too. But here's the thing. And I've heard Christopher Nelson say this. I've heard Matt Wilkins say this. I've heard numerous of other people say this. And going through this with an analytical lens as much as I could. Of course I have biases. Everybody has biases. But I'm trying to be as objective as possible. This series did not need to be 19 books. The fatigue really started to set in after Traitor. It's like, been there, done that, let's move on. But it keeps going and going and going, and it doesn't stop, and you're stuck in this story forever, even though a lot of it is meandering. Again, Refugee, Force Heretic, meandering. As fun as it was, Rebel Stand by Aaron Olston, meandering. It had nothing to do with the main plot. It was just to put in another book in this series so the series would be longer. And of course, some of it was, like the James Luceno thing with the duology. I can't get completely mad at him because behind the scenes and stuff, Michael Stackpole was supposed to have a trilogy, but then it got cut into a duology. So James Luceno had to write 2 books. But if he didn't have enough story for 2 books, then he shouldn't have wrote 2 books. But again, I'm scared even if Michael Stackpole did write a 3rd book because I feel like it wouldn't be that good. Or not that it wouldn't be that good, that the pacing would just be off. Because no story, in my opinion, maybe The Wheel of Time will change my mind because I hear that series is also horrendously long. But there is no reason for most series to be, you only make a 19 to 20 book series if you actually have content worth reading for each and every single installment that enhances the plot or a character. No, it's too long. The pacing is off. So by the time I get here, right, I should be ecstatic. I should be so excited to read another entry into the franchise. But I'm just like, can it stop? Can it stop? Like the Vong got old by star. It was over. I get it. Stop. And then it kept going. And it kept going. Traitor, you got the little bit of intrigue. You got Vergir, you got Jason, right? You got the philosophy. You got the conversations. And then it goes back to same old, same old. It gets old. And it's frustrating. It's really frustrating. I used to say, yeah, I'll take another 20. Hell no. Please, no. I'm glad it ended where it did. I don't know if I could take any more. Unless it really just freshened things up and made it amazing. I don't think I could take any more novels of the main plot, if I'm going to be honest. The only way I could suffer more novels in New Jedi Order was if it focused on characters that we haven't seen yet, because that's the only time you can tell a story that's meandering, right? Because it's fleshing out somebody else. But Rebel Stand, for example, is just Luke and people that we know fighting this guy that we know from the Bantam era, and that's cool. But again, it's a waste of time. It adds nothing to the main plot at all. So, main point, part of it is just James Luceno writing this book to be 500 pages, which was unnecessary, and part of it is just franchise fatigue, because 19 books was too much for this series. I'm glad after this they dropped down to 9 books. Though 9 books in of itself is still a bit much, but it's much more tolerable than 19. And that's my little rant over and done with. We haven't even gotten to the plot yet. So, this book, sorry, it's become a little bit of work, and it's been frustrating. So, this book, it's the grand finale. Everybody kind of shows up. Every character that we've seen from the past and everything kind of accumulates. It's the Avengers Endgame. They all show up. They all get little bits of parts to play. They all get a little bit of time to shine. Kip Duran gets time to shine. Corran Horn gets time to shine. Jaina Solo gets time to shine. Jason Solo gets time to shine. Luke Skywalker gets time to shine. Mara gets time to shine. Tahiri gets time to... Every single person that's been in the series thus far gets a moment of coolness or a moment to do something. Han and Leia, Lando, Talon Karrde, Booster Tarek, everybody's here. It's the grand finale. The first 200 to 300 pages kind of meander. Jason is still trying to figure out who he is. He ends up not doing what I think Vergir wanted him to do. So that's already something. I'm not going to get into that until spoilers. But, what I will say is everything that happens, it all culminates near the end to going to Yusantar, Coruscant, to take down Shimra. And so, of course, mysteries are revealed. There's a plot twist. And some cool things happen. And, of course, it's the end of the series, so the Vong are going to be defeated. How are they defeated? Are they all wiped out? Are they all genocided? What happens? You'll have to read the book to find out. But this is the conclusion to the 18 books prior that you've been reading. This thing that, in real life, this would have been going on for a couple years. in universe and outside of the universe, you've been reading these books for a couple years now, waiting for them to come out publication wise. You know, I read these back to back to back in a couple months, but still, that's, you know, it feels like a long time. It feels like I've been stuck in this war for a long time. You know, so this is the culmination of all that. It's the ending, and of course, there's some stuff going on outside. It's a bit scary. Hold on. Sorry. There's just a lot of noise going on out there. But yeah, culmination of everything. It's the ending. It's a good ending. You know, if you wanted to stop here, I completely understand. I think there's some epic stuff that goes on down the line, but neither here nor there. We'll talk about it when we're there. I won't harp on it here. But yeah, it's a good finale. It meanders. It's a bit slow. In the first like 200 pages, I feel like, why is it wasting my time? And then the last 300 pages is when stuff starts rolling, and that last like 100 to 120 just solid stuff all the way through, paced brilliantly, just brilliant all the way through. But you just got to get through a lot of schlock to get there. So, you know, as much as I love James Luceno and as much as I know others will, and I'll get backlash for it, I can't just stand here and lie to you about how I feel about it, which is that this, again, just, it's, the whole series just doesn't know how to pace itself. Only a few books do it properly. Greg Keyes is just brilliant. Every single one of his books never felt like the pacing was off. You know, Traitor, another one. Vector Prime, I guess. This introduces everything. Maybe I feel like Stackpole's trilogy or duology meanders a bit. I think this whole series just has a bit of a problem of knowing how much it needs to actually tell. I don't know. But it was a good finale to this series. But because of how long it was and because of how exhausted I am with this story, I'm actually super excited to see what's going on moving forward so I can get something more fresh and get out of this funk of being stuck with the Vong all this time, because as fun as they were, they outstayed their welcome. And so I'm ready to move on to something new. I'm going to get into spoilers. If you've seen this book before, you can stick around. If you don't care about spoilers, you just want to hear my in-depth thoughts, we can do that. You know, I didn't mean to rant so long. It's just, it's been a thing. It's been on my mind. But, you know, again, I love this series as a whole. I just think there's a couple books that could have been edited out or just cut down. They could have made this whole series be a lot stronger than it actually is in practice. But overall, I still love NJO. I think overall, as a story, in all of its like overall form, is the best story that Star Wars ever told. But if you're going book by book by book, I think you'll start to notice the cracks start to show a bit. And nothing's perfect, and neither is New Jedi Order, but it is what it is. But Unifying Force, the grand finale to everything. If you've invested your life into reading 18 books this far, then of course you're gonna read this finale, and it doesn't disappoint. So definitely check out. I'm getting into spoilers. If you don't want that, get out of here, okay? Cool. Let's get into the meat and potatoes. Shimra and Naminor in the beginning, there's a interesting dynamic between them, because now Naminor is prefect. Shimra's starting to act a bit more weird, though. And we'll have that answered at the end of the book, but he's starting to act a little off. I forgot, actually. Harar is alive. He seemingly died at the end of the Final Prophecy, but no, he's fine. He's alive. He's good. And so he's back with our heroes and everything. It's interesting. I wrote Naminor doesn't give anyone the benefit of the doubt. Because he talks about the choices he had and what he could and couldn't have done. And ultimately he chose Shimra out of fear. You know, because he could have helped the Jedi. He could have helped the Shame Ones. Like, he did originally plan on it and promise to. But he just didn't see them having any chance of winning. And on the off chance that the humans, you know, the Alliance or whatever did win, he didn't think that they would grant him mercy. And as we learn at the end of the book, he doesn't think he could live in the world even if they did. Because they're just so different from him. So it's ultimately his lack of faith in people, believing that they're just as bad as he is, that kind of leads him to just side with Shimra, which is a bit sad. I kind of wanted to see redemption for, non minor. But alas, he remains his slimy self to the very end. So the interesting thing, too, is the Shamed Ones and the Vong as a species and the lack of follow-up. Because, we see them briefly in the Dark Nest trilogy in the very beginning. And then for Legacy of the Force, Fate of Jedi, we see them a little bit in the Legacy comics, but for all intents and purposes, we just don't know what happened to them. We have the one Vong in the Mercy Kill X-Wing book. But outside of that, we just have no idea whatever really went on with them. So I feel like that's a missed opportunity in the EU that could definitely be brought back up. Maybe even Abeloth starts messing with them, and that's a whole crisis. I don't know. But there's a lot of interesting things that could be done there. And I'm super invested in knowing what's been going on with the Vong post-Crucible, since we don't really have an answer at this point. And obviously before Legacy. Boba Fett. Do I care? No, because they never included him in this series. At the last minute, Boba Fett shows up with the Slave 4. He's in charge of a bunch of Mandalorians now, apparently. You gonna elaborate on any of that? No, James Luceno? No, none of the other authors? Awesome. So, that could have been a complete side story that had nothing to do with the main plot, and that would be okay. So that way the payoff for him helping out in the finale would matter. But instead, he's just in charge of a bunch of Mandos now, or people dressed in Mandos. We don't get anything as to what that's all about until series later. So if you don't read series later, then Boba Fett is just there. And he's just apparently in charge of the Mandalorians, or people dressed like Mandalorians, because they don't explicitly tell you that. So he just comes out of nowhere, helps Han out for a second, bails, and never shows back up again. It's so stupid. It is so stupid. I'm sorry. So, Bounty Hunter, for 30 years, doesn't change, remains consistently the same one-note character, then, randomly, out of nowhere, with no explanation, he's just in charge of Mandalorians. I know he is because I've read stuff after, but if you're reading this in chronological order, you don't know that, then he is just Boba Fett, the bounty hunter, with either Mandalorians or people dressed like Mandalorians, because, it was only because of the prequels we know that he's the son of Boba Fett, but then there's still a question, or of Jango Fett, but there's still a question of, is he actually a Mando? Anyway, but that's all prequel stuff, and we hate the prequels, right? Whatever. So he's just there, he helps out, and he bails like that, and he's gone. It's so fan servicey and stupid. He does nothing. He helps out for a split second, then bails, and there's no progression of his character. There's no explaining how this happened, why he became this way. There's that one comic, but they don't address it here, so it doesn't matter. And he's just, in charge of these guys. He's willing to help out Han now. Sure, you can just intuit that he thinks that the Vong threat's worse than dealing with Luke and Han, but where were you for all these 19 books? Karen Travis explained it, thank freaking God, but as far as the NJO writers are concerned, they didn't bother to bring up Boba Fett at all. Until this last instant, out of nowhere. I can't explain to you how stupid I think it is. I hate it. It's not because I hate Boba Fett. It's because it's contrived and it comes out of nowhere. And it's not that cool as it tries to be. I'm sorry, it's not. It could be if I gave a damn about Boba Fett, or if they explained to me, oh, yeah, obviously I know the stuff with the Karen Travis now, but if we didn't have that, they could have been like, oh, well, Boba Fett, realized there wouldn't be much bounty hunting to do with the Vong took over, so he found some fellow Mandalorians and decided I'ma use them. I'll pay them maybe, or I'll actually take responsibility and evolve as a character for once in my life, and I'll help the good guys defeat the Vong because they're the bigger threat, And that's all headcanon. That's all just me talking off the top of my head. If I didn't know the future stuff exists, I'm just making stuff up. I'm fixing the plot. It just makes no sense. It's supposed to be this cool scene. It's retarded. Sorry. And I didn't mean to be insensitive, flustered. Grander view of the Force, Luke is just Luceno and the authors of New Jedi Order. So again, I've cracked the code. I understand where the miscommunication and the arguments I've had online have come to, and I completely agree with you. This is what the series is saying. The series is saying there's no such thing as the light or dark side. It's all figments. It's all fake. It's only ever been the person's heart. That the Jedi and the Sith have both misinterpreted the Force and what it is. It even says in the back of the book, there's an interview that James Luceno and the other writers wanted to demystify the Force. Funny, it's okay when James Luceno does it, but when the prequels does it, even though it doesn't, but you claim it does, it ruins it. Interesting. So it just really depends on whether you like the person or not who's making that decision. Got it. But anyway, so behind the scenes, they wanted to demystify the Force. They wanted to change some of the aspects of the Force that George Lucas has set up and everything. I mean, they say it's like in accordance with it, but like they wanted to introduce this new thing to you. So the idea is that there's no light side, there's no dark side. Luke has been inherently wrong from the get-go to worry about the dark side all these years because it was only ever the darkness inside him. So, this as Palpatine says, this need to encompass a wider view of the Force, but a more positive version of that. Like, not a sinister version of that, a positive. No, the Force is so much larger, so much grander, so much more amazing than you thought it was. And so the light side and dark side are just falsehoods. It's it's not about that. It's about the person within. Like peace and no war, man. Like it's just a matter of who you are on the inside. If you turn to the dark side, it's because you're a bad person at heart. But otherwise, you're all good, man. And the Vong are outside the Force, so do they not matter? Of course they do. So it's this whole thing of trying to explain this wider view of the Force, the unifying Force, if you will. And I'm almost dead certain now, Vergier wanted Jason to usher in this new era of the Force for the Jedi, this new understanding. And Jason was meant to lead this new wave of Jedi philosophy and their peace and prosperity and happiness for all time, happily ever after. That was the goal that all these writers kind of wanted to set up for the ending of the universe, for the ending of the saga. Would be that after Jason goes through his little journey or whatever that they tease at the end of this, that he would become this grand teacher, the next Qui-Gon Jinn. He'd usher in the Jedi into this golden age, and they'd be perfect and amazing, and there would never be strife or conflict again. And if there is, these enlightened Jedi would be there to fix it, But there's a lot of issues I have with that. One of them being the back of the book. I'm going to keep using behind the scenes things here because there's a thing called an interview at the end of this book interview with Jim and Shelley Shapiro and stuff, where they talk about Luke didn't know anything about the prequels, even though the prequels are coming out this time, and so through Vergier we could give him what the prequel Jedi were all about, even though, have you seen the prequels? Vergier's nothing like the prequel Jedi at all. Like, at all. That's a load of horse shite. Because she's nothing like the prequel Jedi. I don't know what they're talking about. I don't know what he's talking about. She's nothing like the prequel Jedi outside the fact that she started as a prequel era Jedi and then left with the Vong. Nothing about her character, her demeanor, or any... The most you could argue is she's another Yoda from Empire Strikes Back, but I think I've proved time and time again through these reviews that she's not. But the one thing she isn't is a prequel era Jedi. But that's what they were going for. Like, now Luke has learned the secret, the prequel Jedi were flawed because they got prideful, da-da-da-da-da-da, but she's like the proper prequel Jedi or whatever, da-da-da-da-da, and it's now healing, true transcendence. You learn the truth, And so this is something to hammer in again and again. This really started with Destiny's Way, and it kept going Trader did it in a much more nuanced, more interesting way. And this is obviously something that James Luceno wanted. And so it's just like 3 to 4 different times, different people have different conversations that all amount to the same thing to kind of hammer in this point to you that the Force is larger than you thought it was. Light and dark side aren't real, and that's another thing. People told me that no, that was just Vajir. She was only saying that because the Vong were watching. Everything she says is a lie. That's not what she means, guys. That's not what she means. But that's clearly what Jason thinks that she was saying, because he repeats it ad nauseum in this book, that there's no light or dark side. That's what he says. He says it. Read the book. He says it. He says it. I'll go find the chapter for you later if you want me to. I'll go find the page number. He says it over and over again. Other people say it. That's the point they want to hammer in home. But anyway, so that's just a big part of this book that I thought I mentioned here. This is where we learn the big thing. The Vong were stripped of the Force, much like Eula Quadroma, or Callista, or the Rakata. They were stripped of the Force by some ancient thing that we still don't have an answer to in this series. We do have an answer in Supernatural Encounters, but that's a review for another time. I mean, you can watch my thoughts videos. I talk about it in part 6, I think. They talk about Luke having a vision of Ben Skywalker piloting a strange starship, which could be the Zoma Sakat or the Vong, but also there's the Omen from the Lost Tribe, which was a very unique Sith ship, which at some point Ben does drive. So obviously that was unintentional, but at the same time, you could totally make that connection now. So I think that's kind of cool. That's not to piss you off. If you don't like that series, that's fine. But it is an interesting connection you can make now. Sakat and Jason talk. Jason and Luke talk. Vajir's belief wasn't common knowledge. This is all the same thing. It's all the same thing. It's continuing to be about the Unifying Force and what that means. Because Luceno, for some reason, really wants to hammer into your head this new idea. He really wants you to understand that before we get to the big action finale. He wants you to understand what's going on here. So he has like 3 people have 3 different conversations about the same sort of topic. So now he writes good, so I deal with it. It's not like the Bounty Hunter Wars trilogy where that guy wrote, I'm not going to say the author's name, and he doesn't deserve it. He wrote literally like almost verbatim the same conversation with slightly different sentence structure again and again and again and again, and it was awful with Prince Zizor and Darth Vader and Palpatine. But you can go watch my review if you care. But yeah, so it's just the same conversation essentially ad nauseum, because he needs to hammer in the point home. Alpha Red returns. All the Jedi are very upset about this. And this actually becomes a big plot point later, because this is like Shimmer's kind of last-ditch effort. Send a Coral Skipper that's been infected with the Alpha Red thing to fly to Zoma Sakat, and if it makes it to Zoma Sakat will get sick and die. So that obviously needs to be stopped. Also, it just passively mentions in one comment that Akbar died of old age in this book. So at least he made it to the end of New Jedi Order. He lived a long life, and we will miss you. We love you, Akbar. Also, something I just thought to mention, this war has been going on for 5 years, and remember that Jason and Jaina started as like 16-year-olds. They are now 20 to 21 years old. And there will be a 6-year gap before the next story officially. So just remember that for remembering ages of people. This is when the book goes from being good to fantastic. It's the last like 120 pages. So they make it to Coruscant. The big battle commences. Tahiri and Mara are at the bottom. You're on the planet like surface. They find Numenor. Mara beats the ever-living crap out of Numenor, which we've all been waiting for forever. And he, like the coward he is, and like, he's always been a talker, a manipulator. He's not a fighter. Most of the Vong have been portrayed as fighters, but he's not one of them. And he begs for his life. It's all lies. It's all just desperate attempts to get out of the situation he's in. But it's really telling. As Joker said in The Dark Knight, in your final moments, we show who you really are. And he just desperately, and even reflects on it in the book that other Vong, they die with honor, they fight to death, But I don't care. I've lived with these beings for too long. I don't want to die. I want to live. Mara spares him. He says, like, we'll let the authorities take care of it. I'm not going to get revenge on you. It's one of my favorite Mara moments, and I don't have many, because I'm going to be honest, Mara's not my favorite character. So, she's aight. Another based moment. We have the big fight between Luke and Shimra. And Luke decapitates Shimra's head. This would be kind of a common trend for Luke for a little bit. That's down the line. But yeah, so he decapitates Shimra. It's a pretty good scene. And then we have the Omni reveal. It's the big twist of like the entire series, outside of the fact that the Vong were a part of the Force that got stripped of it. So the only other big revelation is Omni. Omni's been around since I want to say the first James Luceno duology. And then he was just kind of passively by. He got more prominence as Destiny's Way came out and beyond that. But he was a Vong shaper who accidentally found a way. Like, there was no answer in the new Jedi Order series. It's left a mystery as to they know that they were stripped of the Force, but they don't know how exactly. We do learn that there was an epic war between the Yusong Vong and two competing factions that they were kind of in the middle of, which was the Silentium and the Abenor. The Silentium, now, if you remember, back during L. Neil Smith's Lando trilogy, his amazing droid Vufi Ra was an offshoot of the Silentium. And then the Abenor, or the Dominor, or whatever the fudge it's called. If you remember the droid's 80s cartoon, The Great Heap, from, that one episode, is actually an ancient droid from another galaxy, which is what made the Vong hate technology. But as for how the Vong got stripped of the Force, you have to read Supernatural Encounters to learn how that happens. So, it's actually one of the other reasons why Supernatural Encounters is so based. If you don't know what Supernatural Encounters is, it is a novel that was released by Joe Bongiorno. You can read it for free on StarWarsTimeline.net, but it does give you the answers as to how the Vong got stripped of the Force and what exactly happened. It's great. But, just a little shameless plug in there. I didn't write it, but I needed to share that. But the thing with Omni is he learned somehow to access the Force again. He was the sole Force user of the entire Vong people. And so he decided Shimra, near the end, was gaining control again. I don't know if his muddling ramblings were his beliefs or Omni's coming through. I'm not exactly sure. Because it never seemed like Shimra, much like Nominor, believed in the gods, really. But then again, that could have all been a trick by Omni. But the fact of the matter is, Omni's been controlling Shimra this whole time as his puppet. Shimra is not the Supreme Overlord, it is Omni. It has always been Omni. We just didn't know it. And it is an excellent and well-executed twist, I have to say. But again, it seems like, I don't know, he may be stressed out and going insane. We don't have enough about Omni to really know. It's either he's stressed out going insane. He was originally more like Nominor, where he was just atheistic, but, I can use the Force or whatever this thing is, so I will just use it as a means to gain victory. Or he just literally believed that he got his powers from the gods, and he's just kind of crazy. But regardless, Nominor watches as Jason becomes one with the Force, which is something that not many people have done. I will reiterate, Anakin Solo did it before he died. Anakin Skywalker did it in Jedi Trial, a Clone Wars novel. He did live after using that ability that was just granted to him. But then he turned to the dark side. We really don't have any other examples of people becoming one with the Force. I think there's that one silly Tales of Mos Eisley, if you want to count that, where they become ghosts, that couple. And then that, again, that of itself, like they're dead, right? And they become one with the Force. That's one thing. But we don't really have any examples outside of Anakin Skywalker of someone becoming one with the Force and surviving. It's that, or Anakin Skywalker turned to the dark side. But Anakin Skywalker became one with the Force, so he should never ever have that problem. Because Anakin Skywalker achieved the same exact thing that Anakin Solo did, and the same exact thing that Jason Solo did in that one Clone Wars book. It just didn't last. But if people were to argue with me, they'd be like, well, Jason did all this, so it's impossible. Anakin Skywalker fell. Sure, he's not the same character, but he achieved the same power. But that's neither here nor there. I did want to mention that, though, because I think that's important to note. But yeah, so he epically defeats Omni. Omni's dead, gone forever. Oh, what's that? Jason killed somebody, but I thought he's next Qui-Gon Jinn and he reveres all life. But he just did it. But that happens. Nominor decides, look, I can't live in a world like this. And so he goes out on his own terms. But that's about that for that. Sorry. I'm checking something real quick. Coruscant is forever changed. And by that I mean people make complaints about stuff. I'm not going to get into that. But the Coruscant will be fixed up in later series, but it will never be prequel era Coruscant ever again. It will never be just all city ever again, even as far as Fate of the Jedi. So, also, another interesting point after Jason achieves oneness is when he returns to normal. He talks about how amazing and euphoric this experience was to become one with the Force. It's like going to heaven for 10 minutes and having to come back down to reality. And, he goes, I will probably never ever be able to achieve this by normal means. I'm paraphrasing. But he didn't spend his entire life searching for it anyway. So, that's interesting. Which sets up future stuff. Not that I'm saying this with James Luceno in mind. I'm just saying that it sets up that there could be stories set after if they wanted to. Another complaint I hear is that the Jedi don't have their new order on Ossus. And I thought, that's fair. If Luke says we're going to establish a new Jedi Order on Ossus moving forward, then that will be a solid diss, because they don't do that. But I read the section. Some Jedi wanted to go to Ossus. Luke was going to accompany them, but certainly not all of the Jedi wanted to. It was not a thing of I'm demanding everybody has to go here, and this is like a for sure thing. Let's go check it out. That was literally it. So maybe reread stuff before you say stuff. But yeah, Jason literally talks about, I'm going to go on a sojourn. He doesn't say sojourn, but he mentions like several of the people he's going to meet later, and says like, yeah, I don't want to teach right now. I don't want to become this Jedi Master. I don't want to do this or that. I just want to learn more, which is very in character for Jason. But I do think it goes against what Vajir wanted for him. Because I think her destiny for him was to usher in this new order for the Jedi, of the Unifying Force. But Jason bails. So, I already think, just in this series alone, he went against what she wanted, at least based on what I think she wanted for him. It was a really sweet scene at the end with Pelion talking to Han and Leia, and Tatooine's ghost. He provides her Killick Twilight, the that picture she was trying to get during Tatooine's ghost that has been in the Empire's possession for years now, and he gives it back to her as a gift. Like, have a little bit of piece of home. Thank you for all that you've done. This is as close as I've ever been to Coruscant in a long time, and this new alliance, it's cool. I don't have any kids of my own anymore, but I can tend to my garden. Pelion's such an amazing character, and nobody fails to write Pelion. But so she gets Killick Twilight back, and I think that's also perfect to hand over Killick Twilight, because the next series is going to deal with Killicks. So I think that may have been unintentional, but it's really cool, kind of the synergy there by accident. And then we have the very end of the book. Chewbacca has this tree statue of him on Kashyyyk, and Han says this really heartfelt thing. We did it, buddy. You can rest in peace. Da-da-da-da. And then he stabs Anakin Solo's lightsaber into the tree, leaves it there, and Luke says, when somebody worthy of, if somebody as virtuous as you, Chewbacca, shows up, they can take it out of the statue. Very like Arthur-esque, where he pulls the sword out of the stone. And that's basically the end of the story. Obviously the Vong lose. They are allowed to leave Zoma Sakat so that Zoma Sakat can kind of try to figure things out with the Vong. They run off to the unknown regions, and we just don't know what happens to them. I mean, we see them in the Legacy comics, but in between that time, we don't know what happens to them, unless the EU gets continued. Now, people say this is, this is an ending. I think there are some hiccups with that. We obviously have this little tease there with Jason going on this sort of sojourn, this odyssey, which, they do pick up on in a sense moving forward. And then there's the whole thing back during Destiny's Way where they called Jaina the Sword of the Jedi, which I felt like in New Jedi Order she never lived up to that title. In fact, from basically every story after, I don't feel like she ever lived up to that title. That she would always know loss, that she would always, face danger, but that she would stand tall above others, and she would be the hero of the day. She would be the sword of the Jedi. I'm paraphrasing a lot. But didn't seem like New Jedi Order was that for her. She was always like secondary. She wasn't the hero that saved the day. That was Luke and Jason. Where does this Sword of the Jedi come into play? Not in this series. We needed more. So it didn't seem like an ending to me just based off of that. There's other things too. With the whole interpretation of the Unifying Force and all that. Because in Destiny's Way, Luke is basically possessed by the Force to say that about Jaina. So, because like he says, I didn't mean to say that. I had no intention or plan of saying any of that. It just came out. So I think that is an inherent flaw. And again, ultimately it just comes down to interpretation of however you take the books to be. I've explained it ad nauseum what I think Vergier means. And all I'm saying, and at the end of this series, Jason is just a good guy. He's not going down the dark path. I'm completely on everyone's side who yells at people for saying, no, traitor doesn't mean that Jason's the bad guy. That's not what Vergier was doing. It's not the start of his downfall. Yes and no. Nowhere in Traitor is he meant to start falling to the dark side. Nothing that Vergier said was meant for him to start falling to the dark side. It is the entire philosophy that this whole series is trying to usher in by the end of it, this unifying force. I think it's flawed. I think the franchise as a whole, I think the EU, if you're taking the EU into account, disagree with you. Let's look at the expanded universe as a whole, shall we? We're going to first start with the expansion to Jedi Knight 2, where you play as Mara Jade, the only video game where you get to play as Mara Jade. And in that game, Mara and Kyle Katarn go into this ancient Sith temple. And in that ancient Sith temple, Kyle doesn't choose to do anything. Kyle gets essentially possessed by the dark side and becomes a bad guy at the end of the game, and you must go and save him and bring him back to the light. Kyle didn't choose to go to the dark side. Kyle didn't choose to be evil. Kyle isn't evil inherently. Something took over him. Something forced him to be bad. That completely is contradictory to what Unifying Force and what New Jedi Order is trying to tell us. What else? Yuli Qualdroma. It wasn't exactly a choice, was it? Not exactly. It's more complicated than that. We could even argue that Exar Kun was kind of coerced and forced into becoming a Sith. Sure, he was arrogant, and that was already a path to the dark side. But ultimately, it was an ancient Sith trapping him in a building saying the only way out is if you give in. And sure, that's a choice, but at the same time, that is a real evil spiritual force manipulating someone into something. But sure, maybe you don't have me there. Okay, how about this? How about the fact that in KOTOR, Malak is just comedically and cartoonishly evil? Not a hint of nuance in the slightest until the very last second of the game when you defeat him. Why? Oh, because the dark side, when you drink the Kool-Aid, makes you dumber. Like, actually. Just makes you stereotypical bad guy. This happens throughout SWTOR, alright, with a bunch of the lesser Sith, where they've drinking so much of the Kool-Aid that they get dumber and dumber. You want another example? Okay. Alright. Something written by George Lucas, the god of Star Wars, which without this man, you wouldn't have Star Wars whatsoever. Right, so what happens in episode 3? Anakin kills younglings. Is that because Anakin has this thirst to kill younglings? Is there several books or comics where Anakin's telling us, hey, I want to slaughter younglings today. I want to slaughter younglings today. That's something I want to do. That's something I'm for. Or is it, oh, he's been holding in so much anger, so much rage, keeping his emotions inside that it came out as a boiling point. That when he finally gave in to the dark side, it was like a drug. And he kept sipping it and sipping it and sipping it. So within a short span of time, he was willing to do things that a day ago he wouldn't. He's a special exception. But we don't like the prequels, so we don't accept that. Well, too bad. It's a part of the franchise. So if we're going to critique the thing, then we got to address it. So that is the thing. Dagobah Cave. Now, yes, Stover talked to me. He said, yeah, but what did Yoda say? Only what you bring in. Except you ignore the fact that every single person in this franchise has stated with objective certainty that the Dagobah Cave is filled to the brim with dark side energy. But the dark side isn't real. There is no dark side. It's just you. So how is there a cave filled to the brim with dark side if there's no such thing as a dark side? Didn't think that one through, did you? Apparently not. So point standing. What are all these references meant? What is the point I'm trying to make? This is the point. The franchise doesn't agree with the premise that there is no light or dark side. It doesn't. Yes, people choose the dark side. People choose the light. But like a drug, it becomes an addiction. It becomes an obsession. So, yesn't. Vergier, in her heart of hearts, believes that Jacen Solo is the pinnacle of good. He is the Jesus Christ of Star Wars. He's going to usher in this golden age of the Jedi, this era where everybody is going to learn about the unifying force. There is no light or dark side. It's the good and evil within us that makes us Sith or not Sith. You just gotta, it's just, you're good at heart, Jason. I believe that you are so good that you cannot fall. You would never mindlessly kill people or slaughter them or do any of that because that's not you, Jason. That's what I'm trying to tell you. You aren't that person. You are a good person. You can't fall because there's nothing to fall to. There is no falling to the dark side. There is, are you a bad person or not? Because if you're not a bad person, then you can't fall. That's the point. Jason, don't worry about falling. You won't because you're a good person. You can't. You're not that type of person. There is no light or dark side. There is no force that will bring you to that path. There is only you. Except all the examples I mentioned, franchise doesn't agree with that. So, do I even need to get started on the being that is Darth Nihilus, who's literally just darkness, and the only thing remaining of a consciousness is the need to consume? No. We ignore that. That's a video game. That doesn't count. We're not gonna. Don't bring that up. That makes my points invalid. Oh no. Okay, just block that out. We're talking just the novels, okay? Don't bring up anything else. Well, sorry. It's part of the EU. It is what it is. But so yeah, I think the belief is flawed. But I think Jason takes it to the heart, that he's a good person. And he's a good person throughout all of New Jedi Order. So therefore, he cannot fall. So, 6 years pass, he learns a bunch of new things. It's very vague, we don't know too much about it. But in those 6 years, things change for him. 6 years away from his family, with, according to Darkness, no communication. Just him out there, and whatever he learned. And I don't know about you, but I'm an overthinker. I think a lot. And a lot of times, you can spiral down to dark places, dark thoughts, the longer you spend alone. You need to be surrounded by people. You can't be alone. So, does that help anything? No, but it does go, well, a lot can happen in 6 years, and having a belief that you can't fall is really flawed when there are objective spiritual things that can influence you and mess with you. So, I'll leave it there. I'll get more into it when I get to Dark Nest. But I don't think it's an issue. And I think Unifying Force is an intriguing thing for him moving forward. And the only thing I wish I could do is write a story in between that era. Because I really want to explore that. And I'll make a video giving a kind of fan fiction approach of what I would have done. But that's about that. Overall, this series, this 19-book series, has some highs and has some very, very lows. It is a mixed bag for me. Extremely, extremely mixed bag. But it's a great ride, though. It is something amazing, something that you would never see today really done. I mean, I know there's the High Republic, but that doesn't come close to this. I haven't read it, so it's not fair to me. I'm not saying it's bad or anything. I'm just saying, like, nothing will ever be New Jedi Order again. Not even though they're making a new show or movie called New Jedi Order. Nothing will be New Jedi Order. And it is an experience. A lot of people dislike New Jedi Order because the Vong are outside the Force, whatever, but it explains itself in the end, But overall, I think it's a phenomenal series, despite my gripes with it. And definitely worth your time. Till next time, guys, may the Force be with you. And I'll see you when I review the fanfiction by Hand of Thrawn 45 about Gilead Pelion in between this and Dark Nest. Till then, guys.